happy. It's when you get big citizen turnout.
All right, y'all are live on YouTube now.
We've had a few of those over the time.
When I first got here, we had.
All right, Mr. Chairman, we're live.
All right, call the work session to order. Mr. Watchnick, we're going to discuss proffers with you.
All right. Yeah, I sent everybody a memo. I'm just going to run through. This all started with a question whether we accept cash proffers. Our ordinance is unclear. I think it sort of implies we accept cash proffers, but it sort of implies we don't. And so I just want to talk, or Ted asked me, well, we just talk about proffers in general so everybody kind of understands, especially this might be beneficial for Mr. Marshall in particular. And so I was going to give you just kind of a proffer overview, interrupt me if you have questions. So it's just easier that way. But as I pointed out in my memo, and I'm just going to kind of run through it, we cannot in a normal rezoning create conditions. In a rezoning, you aren't allowed to condition the rezoning on anything. There's no way. And so, you know, when somebody comes in to rezone from ag to a commercial, we can't require them to do anything with an exception. You know, what about SUPs? And that's the exception. Special use permits is the only kind of zoning where we're allowed to create a condition. And what the courts have said is, as special use permits, they're called special exceptions in the state code. Something's unique that requires more scrutiny or stricter scrutiny. So special use permits, we can create conditions. Normal rezonings, we cannot.
So in a case like just a few weeks ago, the example of that, I think, where we rezoned a C2 to a C1 to a C2, and then in the same session, basically approved an SUP with conditions for storage system. Is that, so that's how that works? I mean, you can do it that way?
Yeah, well, the rezoning made it available, the conditional use. Remember, if you look at our ordinance, we have the permitted uses by right, and then you have the conditional uses. So they had to rezone to be able to even catch the conditional use. And so they rezoned to the C2 so they could catch the conditional use that was in the C2 zoning. And so it was a two-step dance of, because the other zoning didn't even have that conditional use in there.
So we get a rezoning and a special use permit simultaneously.
And that happens, it's not unusual.
I think what's a little confusing though is we're not talking about conditions, we're talking about proffers.
Well, and that's
for instance, when we had a rezoning for the Unionville Dollar General store, the person doing it proffered certain conditions, like they would build a fence and that sort of.
Well, that's where I'm headed. What I'm headed is we can't create conditions, but that's what proffers were originally for. The applicant can voluntarily proffer conditions.
And they then become binding.
They become binding, but we have to keep the distinction that we technically can't impose those. Sometimes localities get caught in litigation when they sort of like order proffers. We want this, this, and this. And
like if somebody says, well, I'm not going to support this unless so-and-so.
Right.
That could be seen as a.
So a problem, when we, and this board's pretty good about it, if we want something, we'll say, well, would you be open to, or could we suggest, we're suggesting you proffer this. But what we have to always keep in our brain is we don't legally have the right to condition it. We can't make you do it. They have to, and they're called voluntary proffers.
But if he doesn't volunteer, we don't need to approve it.
Right, well, exactly.
It just has to be worded very carefully.
We just have to be careful that we don't ever, when we're talking about a rezoning, we need to make sure that we give the applicant the opportunity to proffer it and we don't wind up in litigation. And it appear from the transcript or, of the.
And he has to do it before the public hearing.
Well, it's supposed to be in writing in advance.
Yeah.
And then in writing signed, but then after the public hearing, they can amend the proffers.
Yes.
So based on what happens in the public hearing, you can actually make amendments. We've done that. We got probably before a couple of y'all were on the board, but we've actually sat down and hand wrote additional proffers after the public hearing and then had the applicant sign them.
So make sure I'm with you. You're actually using the term proffer the way we typically would think, or at least I thought of conditions as being one and the same. Is that,
And the reason they're proffered conditions, they are conditions, but they're offered by the applicant, not required by us.
okay, because it seems to me that, I mean, let me use the term condition for a minute. Most of the time, the conditions that we would like to see, sort of mitigated some impact. Built, as far as built a fence, or a bigger parking lot, or screening the parking lot, or what
Sign
lights
doesn't
that
fall off or something.
Right. Whereas proffers were sort of inducements almost. But it sounds like that's not a distinction that exists in law, at least.
No, I tell you, and I'm jumping ahead, but I tell you the extreme use of proffers is in Henrico County. If you go up to Short Pump Town Center, if you've ever been there, in Henrico, that development was probably done with 500 pages of proffers.
Yeah,
That's how Henrico develops everything. The developer comes in, we'll have this kind of stucco, we'll have this kind of paint. And Henrico actually negotiates the entire site by letting the applicant proffer what it's gonna look like. Yeah, we like that. No, we don't like that. And at the end of the day, they've got pages and pages of proffers. So that's the extreme on the proffer side. That's how Henrico develops everything.
So we are way ahead of the game with what we're currently doing with Wilderness Crossing. They currently have a website, and they are stating that they will provide all of these different things, and when they bring it forward to us, that is the preferred method, so that we don't have to pull it from.
Are you willing to proffer all of the things you claim you're gonna be doing? See, a lot of that is, because we've all seen it, the developers stand up here and they promise us the sky. But if they don't proffer it, it doesn't become a condition, then that's where the word condition kicks in.
Yeah, okay.
Once they proffer it and we accept it,
Then it's a condition.
then it's a condition. And so one of the things we have to really be careful of is a lot of times we get the sales pitch from the developer, but they don't actually put their signature on that they will do this, this, and this. And so.
So if we ask, would you be willing to proffer this? That isn't requiring it.
No, that's
But it is pretty indicative.
Well, here's a perfectly proper statement. Look, I think this building needs to be brick. I think where you're building it, it needs to be brick. Are you willing to proffer brick? No, I'm not. Okay, well, I'm voting against it because I think it needs to be brick. You're okay. They can voluntarily not proffer brick and you can voluntarily not vote for it.
Sure, okay, all right.
Where it becomes more problematic is cash proffers, which we'll get to in a minute. But for design proffers, we'll win every time.
One thing that I wanted to build on to what Tom was saying too is really, for my whole career, I've seen this notion of people bringing the pretty pictures in and then they don't do it, they change. It's a, bait and switch.
Economic conditions have changed.
Yeah. So one jurisdiction I was in got to the point of saying, if you present any pictures, we are going to make that a condition. So don't even start down that path because it's just too misleading to the public. So I mean, we could become a place that has that sort of reputation of saying, you got to say right up front, if you're showing us anything, whether you're proffering it or not, and if you're not proffering it, I'm not sure we really want to see it.
I think it's a good approach. My attitude is if the developer's willing to show it to us, the developer should be willing to proffer. And here's I've drafted some proffers. We had a big development in Powhatan one time. And what we did is the development will be substantially similar to the documents produced, and the planning director in his sole discretion can determine if it's substantially similar, and that's what they proffered, and that's what we went with. And so that way they could make some minor tweaks without having to come back. Because that's the other thing you got to realize is proffered conditions, once accepted, are part of the zoning. and you actually have to come back and rezone to get rid of a proffer.
So if you were planting 500 Alaskan cypress, but Alaskan cypress are no longer available, you technically have to come back in
You have to come back.
and redo it. And that, I know that's an issue that is happening in the county right now. And it's pretty minor, but it's preventing people from getting their OPs because they'll have one tree that's just not available. The landscape architect put it in there, but it's just not a tree that's available in this area.
And the more sophisticated developers, what you're gonna get is it will be a Leland cypress or similar. And so that, a lot of the more sophisticated developers, what you're gonna get is it's gonna be this kind of tree or something substantially similar to this kind of tree. But the whole point is we can, and I'm gonna sound like Jason Capel when I was coming to the planning commission meetings. Jason, when the Dollar General was being built in particular, Jason was like, why don't we require the best? Why don't we require a brick building and a porch on it? And you know, why do we have to accept what? And that's one of the things I think we need to have in our mind is, look, we don't have to accept that junk looking development you're proposing to us. You know, if you don't proffer a brick facade or whatever we think is important, then we have every right to turn it down because.
Well, it's an odd kind of a thing where and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying it's an odd sort of a situation where on the one hand, we're saying the county can't require proffers, but on the other hand, we can say if you don't have a brick building, we're not gonna okay it. That sounds like we're requiring them to proffer something.
Well, here's the difference. We can't force them to build a big brick building, but.
Well, we can't force them to do anything.
No, but the reality is, if there was no reason, let's say the brick building we're demanding is in an area with not a single brick building, maybe we lose in court. A judge is gonna go, what was, you know, what reasonable relation, why did this one need to be brick with nothing in the area? But if the area is a historic area, for example, and you've got historic buildings, we're gonna win every time when we say, look, if you don't give this a historic perspective, exterior perspective, you know, it's not gonna pass.
Okay, with that being said, if you're in the Rhodesville district, and this has occurred where it has been stated that you will build your building to reflect the architecture of the Rhodesville district.
We try to one of 20.
Yeah, right, try to tell me what it is. And that's actually caused a problem.
And that's why you have one of two issues. I mean, if you look in our code and we have development standards for certain parts of the county where we actually show examples of this type of building or this type of light. So one option is to do it in your zoning ordinance, which we have some of in the overlay district, where we give specifics. It's got to be this type of lighting or whatever, or you use the proffer system like Henrico does to say, okay, you know, we're good with those lights. We don't want modern looking fluorescence. You know, we're happy with. And that's where the give and take with the developer comes. They say, look, we want lighting that's kind of fits the area. And the developer's going to go, well, how about this or this or this? And everybody goes, yeah, we like the middle one. And then developer goes, yeah, well, I'll proffer that. So a lot of this is give and take. A lot of this really this at a healthy level operates at the staff level.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, it seems to me that there's a sort of a process that needs to be defined or maybe refined that gets a lot of this discussion accomplished way before it gets even to the planning commission, let alone to the board, such that there's the expectations have been calibrated for everybody.
And I think that's where that comes in. If you have an educated, trained staff, which I know Ted is working on, once you've got that staff in place, and yes, staff is going to take care of 90% of this. So that by the time it even gets to the planning commission, there's going to be 14 pages of proffers. that everybody, yeah, okay, yeah, we like that, we like that, we like that.
So the board might be sort of hand wringing over one or two, but not
Right.
starting with a blank piece of paper.
Right, we don't want to, we can spend a whole meeting with a blank piece of paper. So really, I think you've hit a nail on the head. It starts at a staff level, but staff needs to be educated as to what they can and can't do and what they should and shouldn't be doing and what we want. Yeah, and that direction will have to come from you guys to staff. As, you know, what do we want, what's the goal on development here?
Are there limits, either practical or legal, in terms of areas that proffers can cover? Set cash aside for a minute, because that's a separate category, but beyond that, is it pretty much undefined, and so?
Yeah, well, what proffers are is, it has to be related to the rezoning somehow. So it has to some way be related to the rezoning. So they, you know, we couldn't get them to proffer us, we'll give you a half an acre in Dallas, Texas, if you'll approve this, because that's not in any way related to the zoning. So they do have to be related to the zoning, and proffers by definition is the other area where a lot of counties mess up. Supreme Court has said they have to be restrictions or costs. Sometimes people will proffer, we've got a setback of 50 feet and they'll proffer 25. And a neighboring jurisdiction has accepted those, where they accept a proffer that actually increases rights. And the Supreme Court has made it clear no proffers by their nature are restrictive. And so one of the things people need to understand is you can't ever proffer your way out of the ordinance by giving yourself a more generous, because I've seen that, like I said, there's a neighboring jurisdiction that in times past accepted those kind of proffers, where they actually had a lesser standard on setbacks or a lesser standard on building height or something like that.
It's a good try, I guess.
And those are void, the Supreme Court has said. So, yeah, there is, by nature, anything that would be a restriction, a cost, an improvement, anything that is related to that development can be proffered. You're also allowed off-site proffers for cash, but we'll get to cash in a minute.
One of the things that you'd mentioned in your memo, that cash proffers are pretty difficult for residential areas.
Residential cash proffers are tough right now.
And my question was that, okay, somebody's gonna put in 1,000 homes. You might need another school, or you might need another 50 buses. You may need, that kind of thing. A capital expense as opposed to necessarily an operating expense. Can they be related? If you're saying I've got 1,000 homes and I'm gonna have a lot of kids in the school?
Yes, and that's part of the question that we need to answer, is you can collect cash proffers for residential development. Now, one problem we have is 2 acre by right. So, if you've got 100 acres, you probably turn that into 40 lots without ever coming to see us, because we've got 2 acres by right.
Mhm.
But in the situation where somebody's got a rezone, if we have a cash proffer, I think we need to kind of add some language to ordinance about cash proffers. I'll tell you what Goochland did to be in compliance with the law. They've been kind of at the forefront of this. Goochland actually figured out they have certain, for an area, like if the school is at 90% capacity, that 1,000 homes is gonna put us over capacity. You can't get proffers for the 10% capacity that's there, but you can get proffers, cash proffers for anything that puts you over capacity. What Goochland built in, they were built mostly volunteer fire. They know at some point you're going to pay, so they added some costs for a fire station, because they don't have any capacity. Your volunteer technically isn't your capacity. So Goochland has a little line for schools. 2 of their schools are at 100% capacity. So if you're in one of those districts, they have a little line for developers for schools. They have a little line for fire and safety. The other one Goochland did is they put road projects in their CIP, knowing those would never be built unless they're built by a developer. But if the development triggers the need for that road project, now there's a vehicle for collecting a proffer to help do that road project. And Goochland has done a couple of intersection improvements, a little bit of a road widening area, turn lanes. They've done some things because they put road projects in their CIP. And then they built that into their proffer policy. And so Goochland just analyzed what does it cost us, you know, if 500 homes come to an area.
Well, we had a policy in the past where we said, okay, for, let's say, libraries. And we've got libraries now, and the average capital cost per resident is so much. And if you're gonna bring so many more residents, that should be the price that you would have to pay for a library. That I know didn't do very well, but that was an attempt to calibrate what the proffer cost should be, or what a cash cost proffer should be, which if you were, let's say, okay, I'm at 90%, well, should you pay for that other 100%, or should the people already there? I mean, there was that other 10%.
And this is where the General Assembly screwed us over. Here's how this works, if this is going to be counterintuitive, but this is how it works. I have a school with 100 seats left. 100 seats capacity left in my school. And I have 10 rezoning applications come that night, and all of them are gonna add 100 children. The law says you have to consider existing capacity and can't get a cash proffer if there is existing capacity. Well, technically, each one of those 10 has enough existing capacity, even though we're talking about 1,000 more kids, the way the law is written, and this is one of the screwy things in the law. Does that make sense? You actually, everybody gets the benefit of the existing capacity.
Well, you approve one and you postpone the other.
That's,
But still existing capacity, so that one's built and those seats are full. That's the crazy.
well, yeah, I mean, you have to wait, yeah, you gotta wait till the seats are filled.
The new proffer, cash proffer law is a perverse incentive to live at the edge of your capacity. It's literally a perverse incentive to be at the edge. Now, one of the things that
So if I said, okay, I'm at 99% and I've only got room for one student, and you want to put 100 in it.
now I can ask for a cash proffer and there's a 99.
Okay, so you've given me a cash proffer, but the next guy comes in, I haven't built built any additional capacity, yet still I've only got room for one student.
And we could still collect. That's what I'm saying. There's a perverse incentive to sit on the edge of capacity on whatever you're doing.
Okay. So it's a two-way street. We could get screwed or we could screw somebody else.
One of the things the General Assembly did this past session to fix this, though, used to be the penalty for violation was draconian. Somebody could come in and proffer us cash. They could say, we'll give you $10,000 a person, a house. After they proffered it, we approved the rezoning, they could file suit and say, shouldn't have accepted that proffer. We'd have to refund it, pay their attorney's fees, and pay them damages. So apparently in Northern Virginia, it's not uncommon for developers to use proffers as part of their development scheme. They like them. And so they got to change. So now they put a blurb in July that just took effect, that if the developer proffers it cash,
It's legal.
it's presumed okay.
Okay.
If he's okay with it, he bought now. But that's the kind of thing, there better not even be a hint that we said, why don't you do 3,000 a house or something? But if there's nothing in the record that we mentioned 3,000 a house in the proffer and the.
So if we had a proper policy that was based upon this fractional thing, and that was a written policy, that could screw us.
No, if we can justify it. Again, it then becomes an issue of capacity. In schools, I've had this conversation with school superintendents. How do you define capacity? You know, this room has a capacity of, I can't see where the number
It's
is,
88, it's on the outside.
88.
No, it's only got a capacity of 12 now.
This room has a capacity of 88, but if you cram 88 people, or the wrong 88 fat people in here, and they're not a fit. And so one of my conversations with school superintendents has been, look, is functional capacity, what can you really handle? You know, I know your school says 1,700, but can you really handle 1,700 students? Do we need to, you know, is it more realistic to say your actual capacity is 1,500 or 1,400? Because I think in the real world, because all the state law says is capacity. And so the school buildings, you tend to have this number that's not a realistic number for capacity, because you really couldn't get that many students and have enough science labs and have enough.
But you could say, all right, I built this thing for 1,700, but if I really want to do it right, it'd only be 1,500. Now, I may find that I can put another 100 in there, and I'm stressed, but.
Yeah, but that's not, the state law just says capacity, as long as we can justify what our capacity is.
Okay.
In my conversation, again, science labs was one of the conversations, you know, you need a lot of science labs and certain kinds of rooms that you really can't realistically handle that number of students because you can't provide enough science labs or enough gym space or enough whatever.
Or if I could say, I've got a classroom now, but I'm going to convert it to a science lab, therefore my capacity went from 1,600 to 1,550.
Bingo. So, but part of the discussion you guys need to have, or don't need to, you can have, is whether you want to think about cash proffers. I do think if you want to think about cash proffers, you need to think about the 2 acre by right. And what, you know, because this works well hand in hand with requiring rezonings. And you know, 2 acres is a pretty small, I mean, a lot of developers will go ahead and do a good sized subdivision if they do 2 acre lots, so. Now, having said all of that, commercial proffers, totally different. There's not much in the way of restrictions, they just have to be reasonably related to the development. So commercial proffers, a new fire engine, a new fire station, you know, they're tangentially related. You're gonna, you know, if you're building a strip mall, you know, you're gonna have more fire people, more sheriffs, so they can buy sheriff's vehicles. So it's a much looser standard for cash proffers on commercial development.
The commercial developments, they typically engage with firms that are going to tell them before they ever come to us, you're going to have to do this, this, and this as a minimum when you present it, or they're gonna laugh at you.
Well,
Go on, boy.
Well, let's face it, I mean, to some extent, especially on a commercial side, and I haven't got to the solar yet, which right now the General Assembly is trying to work on the carrot principle. But to some extent, you know, the developer looks at those as sort of a bribe, you know. I'll buy you a new fire engine and 4 new sheriff's cars.
Well, there's a reason for that. It's a bribe.
Yeah, absolutely.
You might not like the word, but
No, it's a proffer. Are we reasonably related?
tomato, tomato, potato.
Look in the dictionary under bribe.
But, well, like, for example, Signature Station, if it ever gets built, we're getting 350,000 towards a fire station up there. So, yeah, and of course, it's like I said, it never gets built, but
But that was in 2011.
yeah. But again, commercial proffers, they haven't really restricted.
It was a time I remember when, from working on the comprehensive plan, we had to add a section on public facilities, basically things that were in the CIP. Because there was a time that said you couldn't accept proffers related to
It's gotta be in CIP.
anything that you didn't plan to build, whether it's a school or a fire station or whatever. So that's still the rule?
Yeah, it's gotta be something that's in your CIP.
Okay.
Could it be 2 years from now or 20?
Well, it's just gotta be in the CIP is all it says.
Okay.
So we can just keep rolling over.
And what I,
Just keep the CIP full.
well, and I've seen development where the developer proffered something in the next meeting, the CIP was amended to include that item. You know, they deferred the developer's proposal, amended their CIP, and then accepted the proffer.
Since it's more pressing, I'd like to discuss some of the solar.
Yeah.
The solar is where the General Assembly has changed the law quite a bit. The first thing they've done is and I quoted in here, the governing body of a locality may grant a condition that includes dedication of real property of substantial value or substantial cash payments for or construction of substantial public improvements, the need of which is not generated solely by the granting of the conditional use permit, talking about solar.
Wow.
So basically what the General Assembly said is the solar companies can bribe you big time. And we've put it in the code that they can. And they will. I mean, there's some of these solar projects. Huh?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, no.
One of the things they did was they changed the tax law, so we no longer got the tax value, which might have been a consideration for any reasonable board. They got rid of that, and guess what? A bunch of localities said, hey, wait a minute, why should we, be welcoming you to come in and not pay your fair share in taxes? So now they're going back saying, well, I guess we can let them bribe you a different way.
Well, the other thing we're now allowed to do is siting agreements with solar farms, the same as you do for like a transfer station, or where we actually have a siting agreement with a periodic payment. That's part of the siting agreement. That's one of the other carrots that the General Assembly adopted. Is so if somebody comes in with a solar farm, and they originally adopted it that it had to be an economic opportunity zone, but most localities don't have that. So this past assembly, they just took that part out. And so we can also negotiate a siting agreement with the solar company, which would generate an annual cash flow.
And that might be viewed in lieu of taxes.
In lieu then taxes they're taking away,
So is there a reasonableness test somewhere in all this?
Yeah, there's a formula, there's a reasonableness test, but well, on the proffers, there's not. It says, and I love this, they use the word substantial property or substantial cash payments. I mean, that's
related.
not related to the solar farm. So they, in my view, the new section 2288.8 for solar is the sky's the limit, on what you could collect in a proffer on a solar farm.
Can we get this communicated to the planning commission before Thursday? And they're already asking for a lot of information because we're getting another solar project coming on, and then they're just lining up at this point. And the more we can flush out before it gets to us, the better off we'll be.
Yeah, I can, I'll have Eric, he's gonna be at the meeting. So I'll just fill Eric in.
Question on the payments, is that more like a one-time payment or can it be over time?
Over time, a siting agreement is basically an annual payment that they
You
pay.
expect to have greater payments over time versus upfront
Well,
one-time payment?
I think you can collect both.
That's in lieu of taxes?
Well, they've already taken the taxes away. If you're under
Who knows
20,
that?
if you're under 20 megawatts, there's virtually no taxes. It's like 20% of your M&T, which,
It's a game that's going to keep changing every assembly.
well, and I think the chairman has, I think I've heard the chairman say this, the reality is if we don't buy it on the carrot, at some point, they're gonna take the carrot away and make it stick and just take our ability to regulate them away, just like pretty much cell towers, we have almost the ability to regulate.
And it's closer,
Sludge.
yes. It's closer than we think.
So, yeah, I'll communicate with Eric to make sure he, is Donald still chair? I think Donald's still chair. I'll make sure they are up to speed on that.
When you were looking at the solar farm, could you summarize the state incentives, inducements, bribes, whatever you want to call them, that are available to these solar farm operators at this point? I know some expired a few years ago, but are there still substantial incentives or inducements
To them?
to the solar farm owner operator?
Well, aside from the tax breaks, I know there's federal credits and
Federal credit still, right?
and so I know it's a very profitable venture because I've seen some pretty hefty cash proffers being offered in a couple of other jurisdictions.
I think a lot of it is tied to the state adopted a
Clean power plan.
and it was for safety of it was tied basically to Homeland Security along with the green.
Grid
Grid
resiliency
security.
and grid security.
Yeah, and that Dominion is going to have at least 425 square miles of solar I believe, within the next 5 years.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, look at Texas in the ice storm. They wouldn't have survived if they hadn't had all their solar and wind power.
Absolutely.
That's all we're doing. That's no,
Yeah.
well, I mean, do we need to better understand this sort of, the economics of this whole deal? Because it's, anecdotally at least, I've heard from landowners, I mean, they're making some very attractive offers to people that have farmed land for 50 years and, you know, they know the economics of, the farmers know the economics of that, and these guys come in and plop
It's big
a
numbers.
big number down for the farmers. So I get why the farmers are interested, because that's tough business. But then the other sides of this are the impacts in terms of the county and the proffers that we're talking about. But there's also, there's a huge incentive package there available to the developers. And in some cases, there are actually mandates on power companies that say you must achieve certain goals. I mean,
And you have a whole
this
bunch
whole
of,
thing is
you have a whole bunch of big companies that are willing to pay premium price for electricity so they can say they're carbon free.
Oh, yeah. That's-
Yeah, I'm familiar with one solar project that all of the power was sold to Facebook before the thing was even built.
Having said all that, we ought to get a slice of this. I mean, if we're gonna put these things in our community, take up our
and that-
beautiful farmland.
Just to be clear, that is a very large if.
Exactly. I mean, that's my point.
What
Either,
you're saying
either,
is, we need to get a piece of the action.
if they wanna come to our community and have all that, then I certainly wouldn't have us roll over and just let them, do whatever. They better pay dearly so that we can say that there is a benefit to the community. Because the benefits that they've talked about in the stuff I've seen, because I push back on these folks, they try to butter me up, and Mr. Administrator, we're coming here, blah, blah, blah. And I say, tell me why I should care. Because we're gonna create all these jobs. Again, no, you're not. You're gonna hire companies that have experience in installing solar. They're not here because we don't have enough of that. Then the thing will get built and they'll go somewhere else, so that it's not really jobs. But we're gonna create all this energy that's gonna run your community. Like, we get our energy from the grid. None of that energy goes only to Orange County. So again, you're gonna come in here and drive a lot of big heavy trucks and take up a bunch of farmland to solve other people's problems. And you've already got all these tax incentives that cut us out. Now, I said, on the bigger picture thing, I'm for America's energy diversity and having long-term sustainability. So I know there's a need, but don't pretend that building a solar farm in Orange County is really benefiting Orange County, because it's really not. And so this conversation about if we decide to allow some of these things, they need to pay us a premium too, because for all the reasons we discussed.
Especially because the solar technology at this point is very close to being outdated. Nuclear energy in portable nuclear power plants is what Dominion's already looking at.
Yeah.
They're in the development stage.
Distributed nuclear.
The Navy's done that for how many years now?
Oh, yeah, it
So,
fits in a room about this size.
yeah, so we were having all this stuff shoved down our throats for something that theoretically is already outdated. And it's just
Well, but if you take the big cash profit up front and quoting Mr. Frame slightly with the modification, solar panels don't get on school buses. If you get enough cash up front and you get a siting agreement with some cash flow and you have nice buffers, maybe.
Yeah, certain sites, it's very location specific.
Yeah.
There may be some sites that are perfectly fine.
Or you can't see them.
there's a very large one right across the county line.
Of course, we also.
We're in court on that on
Yes.
Thursday.
Really? Thursday's court?
I worry that we don't forget the landowner in this either, because in some cases, it's sort of a survival move that they end up making, and
As I've heard it many times, it's my 401k.
Well,
Well,
and
this is
a lot
better
of farmers,
yeah.
you know, that's their only hope of a full.
I know, that's right, and that's,
And so we can't completely ignore that aspect of this either. So there's a balancing act. I mean, I think that at the moment, it appears the way we have it in this county, which is every single one of these has to go through an SUP process. That's probably the right place for us at the moment.
I think every county has the SUP. I'm not aware of any counties that have solar by right.
But there's some ordinances. Some counties have ordinances that try to deal with
And
it.
I would prefer to stay away from an ordinance.
I don't think we're smart enough to write that ordinance. I know I'm not. You know,
Well, if you're not, nobody else is, maybe Lee, I don't know.
not me.
well, but I mean, because each case is gonna have, yeah.
Tim, he's now.
Now, if we wanna put a nuclear
Moving that
power plant,
later.
I'll buy in on that.
I mean, this is a very thorny
It is.
issue where there's not an obvious, easy.
And there's a finite resource here because the reason they like us is two primary drivers. One, a lot of available land, and two, the capacity in the transmission lines.
And the transmission lines are the
That's
biggest
the
driver.
biggest driver.
And
That's the ones they just upgraded?
Yep.
yes.
So now all of a sudden, they want to come tap those things because on places where those are oversubscribed, they can't add any capacity until they do that huge investment. Well, Dominion just ran those new high capacity, high tension lines through and upgraded our whole grid. So they want on.
And the regional commission was nice enough to do a study that said exactly where the prime properties are. So they're taking advantage of that.
So, question that, recalling a phone call I had about 2-3 months ago, looking at a piece of property for a solar farm. And in the conversation, I referred him to that map behind Ted's head there. It turned out that that piece of property was in the dark green A1. And I said, you know, your chances of you getting an SUP in an A1 area, especially for a solar farm, are pretty slim. And we talked about that a good bit. And as far as I can tell, they went to a different piece of property. To what extent can our comprehensive plan help us in this conversation, negotiation, whatever, or is it completely superfluous? I mean,
Well,
there's no way.
here's the interesting thing about solar farms, because they're electrical generation facilities. One of the things the planning commission has to determine is that they're in substantial compliance with our comp plan. You can't, it's a two-step dance to approve a solar farm. Step one is the planning commission has to say it's in substantial compliance with the comp plan, and then only then can they even consider granting an SUP if it's not. So that by state law is one of the only times where your comp plan is in essence binding. What state law says, a comp plan as a general rule is just a guide, a tool. But it says you cannot build an electrical generating facility unless the planning commission has reviewed it. Unless you show that facility on your comp plan, which nobody does, or the planning commission reviews it and determines it's in substantial compliance with the comp plan.
That's interesting.
And if they don't find that, case closed. Now, they could appeal their denial of substantial compliance to you guys, but you gotta cross that bridge before you can approve it.
I'll use an argument I used a month or so ago. When you read the language, the plain language in the comp plan about A1, if it's not ag and it's not forestry and it's not a homestead, then it's not. That's what it says. And I didn't hear solar farm in my.
And these are farms, right? Solar farms, they farm electricity.
Right. Actually, that's a thought I had that I discussed. Keith and I were talking about this the other day. We ought to force a renaming of these things.
It's not a solar farm, it's a solar generator.
Yeah, that's right, something more akin to what the heck they are.
Solar industrial complex?
You
Whatever.
know.
Just take the word farm out of it.
Yeah, call it a waste dump. I don't care what, but not farm.
Well, it's easy to do, we just amend the language in the ordinance, so, I mean, if y'all are serious about that, just let us know and we'll
Yeah,
initiate
because
it.
they're not farmers.
Yeah, I don't like, I mean, they picked the word farm intentionally. We all can speculate on what that intention was.
Makes it more palatable.
Absolutely.
I'm sure of other patients.
You go to the beach, you get a suntan,
Anything
that
else
doesn't
you
make you a
need?
farmer.
Unless anybody saying you have questions.
I really like this kind of a conversation, having this in depth. This,
Well,
I
especially
appreciate
when
that.
something is sort of circling above our heads.
Sure. I
Like
mean,
this is.
I can think of a lot of other things that have come up that deal with this kind of in-depth issue of whether it's land use or any other laws that would affect what we do.
Anytime you need anything, just let me know.
All right, thank you very much, Tom. That's a work session, take a 5-minute break.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna take a recess before the regular meeting.
Sure thing.
Cole, we're ready to resume the live feed.
Sure thing, you're good to go.
Mr. Chairman, we're ready.
Okay. Call the meeting to order. If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we have two changes to the agenda. Actually, the 2A under the adopted agenda, the county administrator has an introduction that he would like to do. And the other one is to move item 4A out of the consent agenda and move it down to become 5A under new business. Any other changes, additions, or deletions? Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved. Second?
All in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Mr. Voorhees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Board members, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our new Human Resources Director, Jennifer Carpenter. Jenny, would you step forward to the podium? Jenny is an Orange native, so we've got a great deal of experience with the community here, and she comes to us from Teachstone in Charlottesville, where she's been Human Resources Director for a while. Would you like to say a couple words to the board?
Well, thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. As Ted said, I am a native to Orange. I have lived here my entire life, and excited to make an impact in this community that make it a better place to work and live. So I'm excited to be a part of this.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. And if you could do us one favor.
Yes, sir.
For just a moment, take your mask off, so if we should actually see you somewhere, what you look like. So, all right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
All right. Next is our special presentations and appearances. Business Spotlight is Denise Caswell from Trinity Senior Village. She's the Director of Sales and Marketing.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm sure you all are familiar with and aware of Trinity, obviously. So we are a family-owned and operated assisted living and memory care in Locust Grove, located very close to Lake of the Woods. On the property, we have two buildings. One is an assisted living and one is a memory care. So we do have our community needs separated. Each building has the ability to provide a home for 23 residents. We have 19 single suites and 4 shared suites. We do provide the owner's objective was to provide a home-like environment, and I welcome you to come and tour our community. I think you would agree that it is very much like a home setting. It is all in one level, very easy to navigate and get around. Also, the purpose for the home to be so on the smaller side is so that we can provide patient-centered or resident-centered care. So whatever their needs are, we're able to better address them in a smaller community. We currently staff approximately 20 individuals, and they consist of, that's in addition to our leadership team, but they consist of our dietary staff. We employ CNAs and registered med techs. So all of our staff is licensed and do require, continuing education along the way. The leadership team consists of Barb and Ken Tomeko, which probably many of you know. They are the owners. Their son Brian is the CEO of their company. Their son Kevin, the architect, has overseen the construction of the buildings. And then their daughter Carrie is the COO, so she does the daily operations of the community. So we have an executive director, the resident care coordinator, and then myself. We did open our assisted living community on January 15th, and we admitted our first 3 residents. So we're up and running and we're very excited about that. The mission through all the building and through all the things is really to provide a home for these people and get to know them and have them be part of our family. So it's wonderful to have that finally happening. There's several features of Trinity, and I'll just highlight a few. One of them is our wellness program. So our community is really based on the tenets of the Christian belief of the mind, body, and spirit. So following that, to stimulate the mind, we have music, we have art, pet therapy, just to name a few. Games, we have a library, both physical and we have a virtual library. And as far as the body goes, we have daily exercise classes, including yoga, chair yoga. We have a fitness center in our assisted living building that can be utilized by both of our communities. And we also have an on-site provider, Beata, that will provide physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy to our residents. We do encourage when they come in to come in with that order so that they can be assessed, so we can build them and get them to the best possible shape that they can be in to help them, I guess, basically, continue on and be as most self-sufficient as they can. As far as the spirit goes, we do have a community chaplain, that's Brad Hales out of Culpeper. We have Bible studies, cooking, and gardening. When I mentioned the suites or the rooms, we have 3 styles of suites, single suites, and then we have the shared suites. We have a courtyard, we have a bistro in addition to our kitchen and dining room to provide daily snacks and hydration, also activity of cooking. We have a couple of modern technologies. One is called Care Predict. It is a wristband. Each resident is given a wristband. It's programmed specifically for them. You use it like a key fob and it'll get them in and out of their room. It acts as a two-way communication to the staff. They can push it if they need something and the staff will respond. Everyone that works will be wearing a wristband and everyone is notified. And then someone responds that they're going to help that person. So things are tracked and we do things in a timely manner. It also will act as a GPS throughout our community. There are sensors that track it. So we can get real-time location of someone should they be in need or we need to find them and they're not in their room. It'll also monitor where they are in the community and for safe exiting, that kind of thing. It gives us oversight as far as that goes. And one of the really neat things about it is we ask them to wear it on their dominant arm, and it is got artificial intelligence. So over time, it tracks patterns on these individuals. So we know how much they're eating, how much they're drinking, how far they're walking, how they're sleeping, how many times they get up in the evening. So all of that is monitored. We get reports so that if we see changes in someone, it may indicate maybe they have a UTI or just monitoring, their daily habits as far as eating and drinking. Just to notice that some decline and we can nip something in the bud perhaps. Then our last technology that I want to talk about is called It's Never Too Late. It is a large screen similar to this, and it is loaded with over 4,000 activities. So they can travel, they can sing, there's pet therapy, there's games, all kinds of things, just to keep things new and interesting, and that's in addition to our normal everyday activities. And we certainly want to have the community coming in once that's available as well. But in addition to the activities, each person with the help of the staff, understandably, can create their own page. They can load on the things they specifically like. In addition to that, they can have email where they can keep in touch with family members. It also Skypes. And they can also download personal photos and things like that to their page. So it keeps them engaged and in touch with family members, friends, particularly in this time where visitation is still a little bit limited. Just to sum it up and in closing, I just wanted to let you know our mission statement. It is to enrich the lives of the people that we care for every day by providing them a safe, supportive home with integrity, compassion, and dignity. So I welcome you to come at any time for a tour. And does anyone have any questions? I'm not sure how this goes.
So they actually issued me a bracelet today, so.
Yeah, and I don't know how you got out. You're one of those sneaky ones that maybe
That's right.
figured out how to take it off, right?
That's right. It's a very, very nice facility. It's very modern and welcoming. Something that was definitely needed in the east end of the county.
Yeah, I think the location is really wonderful. One of the it's interesting things, because not only does it service Orange County residents and the Lake of the, I mean, obviously that's part, but the Lake of the Woods in that community, but actually we've had a huge outreach from people that live in Lake of the Woods that are children of parents out of state that are actually looking to bring their loved one to Orange County to be closer to them. So, thank you.
What's your total enrollment,
Total enrollment right now,
What's your capacity?
the capacity in each building is 23. Mhm.
And you have plans for 2 more buildings.
That, yes,
Yeah.
if I do my job well,
Right.
when I do, well, I shouldn't say if, when I do my job well, and we're able to service the community, yes, we plan on building more. Any other questions? All right, it's a pleasure, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Denise. I see that Casey has joined us. Next is the annual report from the Cooperative Extension Office. Welcome, Casey.
Hi, evening, gentlemen. Thanks for having me. Sorry that we can't be together with our Extension Leadership Council this year and having a meal, but I did want to just draw your attention to some things included in our annual report. Whereas most of the county departments operate on a fiscal year structure, Extension uses the calendar year. So for 2020, obviously COVID impacted a lot of the work that we were able to do, but it didn't stop us. It just changed how we delivered those programs. In the reports that you received, those are broken down by the program area. In our Family and Consumer Science program, Claire Lillard is our extension agent there. And so one of the things she really focused on in 2020 was continuing to provide food safety training, because so many of those restaurant workers and nursing home personnel and things like that were frontline workers. It was important that they be able to keep up with their certifications as required by the health department. So that was something that she did. Right before the shutdown, we were able to do a poverty simulation for all of the Head Start employees. That went really well. We brought in folks from each of the Head Start centers, localities, and we put them through a simulation to see what a lot of their clients go through. So in terms of having trouble securing housing, finding transportation, who's going to watch my children, where am I going to purchase groceries, and how much money do I have to do that? That went really well, and we are looking forward to doing that for the entire public school system and possibly county government employees as well. We just need for our numbers to open up a little more. COVID was one of those things that caught us on that. Claire also started a program with senior citizens called LIFT, and that is a weightlifting program or a toning program for senior citizens. She's had a lot of success with it. Claire's position covers Orange, Madison, and Culpeper counties. And so with her Madison group, they were the pilot. They have continued that program on their own, still meeting twice a week, continuing with their exercise. And so she got it started here in Orange and at the senior nutrition site, and then COVID happened. But we have plans to continue that program. Unfortunately, Orange and Madison are really high in the adult rates of type 2 diabetes and obesity. So she's been working with a program called Balanced Living with Diabetes, which offers A1C testing for the individuals at the beginning of the program. And then they go through a series of weekly classes and recipes and support systems, and then have a reunion meeting to see hopefully a decrease in their overall A1C, measuring their blood sugar over time. So that's another program that will continue in 2021. A lot of the food distribution sites, both through the public schools and through the local food banks in all 3 counties, requested information for nutrition education. And so Claire provided publications and easy recipes that folks could prepare with the foods that they were given. So that was another cornerstone of her program in 2020. Our home horticulture program is led by Ashley Appling, who is actually stationed in the Culpeper office, but she provides services to Orange and Madison counties as well. She had a record year. She offered a series of gardening courses online and had over 1,600 people participate in those classes. I think with more families being at home during the pandemic, they had more time to explore what's happening in their own backyard and try their hand at some food production. And so we were happy that she was able to provide those services. We also had the Master Gardener Help Desk were not staffed because of COVID, but the questions that came in were forwarded to Ashley on an individual basis. And she did a great job of providing feedback and follow-up for those clients. So that worked really well, given the situation that we were in. Our agriculture and natural resources agent is Courtney Wessner, and this was her second year in the program. She worked on pesticide recertification for private applicators. And so a lot of that was done online this year because of the limitations of COVID. Courtney was involved with the bull test station at Glenmary Farm in Rapidan. And so there are 2 bull test stations in the state where producers bring in bulls. They are evaluated for their productivity. They are fed the same diets, and then those that make the cut are sold at an auction twice a year. And so that is a program that we are able to offer locally, and she had a definite leadership role in that. She continued her beef quality assurance trainings, both for youth and adult audiences who needed that in order to be able to market their cattle. She wrote several plans for folks looking to change their cattle working facilities and possibly their winter feeding facilities. And so that was another outreach. A lot of her work was done one-on-one, working with producers over the phone and with farm visits and things like that. And then she also was invited to judge the Cattlemen's Congress beef show, a Simmental show, which was held in Oklahoma City in early January. And so it's just really impressive to have such a wonderful set of accolades for a young judge, and her expertise was sought out for that. So we're real proud of her that she represented Virginia and Orange County, put them on the map for such a large national show. Kelly Carr and I led the 4-H youth program. And so we had a lot of our Hallmark programs that had to be altered to fit more of a virtual delivery method. The 2 biggest ones you're probably aware of would be the county fair and 4-H overnight camp. We were in phase 2 of the governor's restrictions during the time of the Orange County Fair, and fairs were expressly prohibited. So we put together a virtual show and sale for our kids that actually went really well. A lot of people wondered how in the world can you show an animal virtually, but our kids took videos and presented their animals. We still were able to retain our out-of-state judge. And so she provided feedback during a live Zoom presentation. I can't say enough good things about the community and how supportive they were of our kids. Certainly nobody asked to be put in the situation that we were last year, but we offered an online sponsorship platform. So instead of selling the animal, it was a way for kids to try to recoup some of their expenses and have startup money for this year's projects. And the community donated almost $50,000 to our kids. And so I just can't say enough good things about how supportive everyone was in that segment. For camp, we couldn't do overnight camp. And so we had a virtual that our teams led. We filmed a lot of videos, put a lot of things online, even a tie-dyeing class. We had a drive-through tie-dye experience. So we tried to be creative and find ways to still stay connected to the kids, even though it was in a different capacity than what we are used to. Orange County was a site of one of 6 around the state for distributing over 15,000 free books to students, mostly in the middle school age. We were able to use the Bluebell facility for distribution of this, and so that allowed us to reach over 16 counties here in this part of Virginia. Orange County teachers were invited to come and shop for free. And so we estimate that over 1,500 of those books went directly into the hands of Orange County students. And so that was a big project in August, but we were happy to do it. And then we also were able to donate a pallet of books to the Orange County Children's Toy Box initiative that Donna Wall Robinson leads in the December timeframe. We have a horse club that got up and going again. That's meeting in the Mine Run area. We had taken a hiatus. We didn't have a volunteer to lead it. And we had a woman who moved in from California who was a 4-H leader there. And so we are proud that that program is up and going again. Horses, of course, have a long tradition here in Orange County, and we're glad we have a 4-H program for that. Kelly Carr is our 4-H program educator. She came up with a pumpkin growing contest for kids and adults. And so we had lots of people who accepted the free seeds, and then we provided information on growing and raising the pumpkins, and then had a final weigh-in right before Halloween out at the Virginia Tech Center on Route 15. So that went really well. Kelly also offered a hand lettering course at the beginning of the pandemic when people were at home, and so taught them more of the visual arts and how to create sort of their own font when it comes to designing paper printed materials and cards and gifts and things like that. For 2021, our focus is going to be on fruits and vegetables, how to grow them, how best to cook them, how to eat them, and how to do all of that safely. So that's what we're looking at for 2021. Things are starting to open back up, so we're meeting in person when we can and when we're below the limits. And we also have a number of virtual programs that are being offered. I appreciate the time to share with you guys this evening. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those, or I'm available outside the meeting through the extension office.
Thank you, Casey. Any questions or comments for Casey? All right, very good. Pleasure seeing you as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care. All right, item 4 is a consent agenda. Here's minutes. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, we do have Alan Saunders, I believe, on Zoom as well.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Is he there or?
Hi, good evening, gentlemen.
Yes, okay, very good. Welcome, Alan.
Well, thank you very much. Chairman Crozier, members of the board, good evening. I am Alan Saunders with VDOT here for your quarterly update. I'm going to reference your latest monthly report and can address any questions that you may have. And Allison, is that in front of them?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ms. Simpson. Starting on page 1, in Smart Scale, the county submitted 4 applications in round 4, and a green tee at Route 3 and 20, a roundabout at 2522, and another roundabout in Gordonsville at 231 High Street. And thankfully, one of the 3 applications was selected for the recommended funding scenario. That's being presented to the Commonwealth Transportation Board later this spring. And we're excited that one of them made the cut and scored well enough for funding. We are going to begin planning later this year for Smart Scale Round 5. If you remember, for Round 4, we backed up and began preparing in early spring last year. We're going to back up even further and try to begin planning sooner to try to improve our scores for Round 5. On page 2 of your monthly report, your projects, also thankful to report the Somerset Roundabout was completed on schedule in December, and so far it's working well. We've received really good feedback for that, and it was great safety improvement. The engineering for Route 601 west of Lake of the Woods, the curve safety improvements, that's on schedule. Design should be wrapping up, and we are on schedule to advertise that for construction next summer. The Route 635 Greenwood Bridge replacement project currently underway, and construction is on schedule for completion later this summer. On the rural rustic projects, we'll continue to advance Route 602 westward this year as the funding becomes available and get that hard surfaced hopefully all the way through. Route 630 Matthews Mill is next. We're currently preparing our secondary 6-year plan packets to share with you in the coming weeks. We should have those to you in March. And it's not listed on your report, but I did want to note that the preliminary engineering for the roundabout at Route 20 and 33 in Barbersville, the eastern intersection, the design for that will be underway soon. We had our first project meeting for that last week, and thankfully we've learned a lot from the roundabouts we've designed so far, and that one's getting started. Bottom of page 2, your resurfacing. We're preparing for the 2021 season. We're going to share a list of routes for the coming weeks separated by district. And please let us know if you have any questions about those routes. We have some time this early in the season if we need to adjust those routes as they're listed in the contract, but we need to jump on that. Page 3 of your monthly report, traffic engineering studies under review. The variable message signs, I always want to put a plug in for agricultural traffic. If there is anything that we can do there, if your farmers have a need or they're going to be out in the roadway for specific needs over a few weeks, we have our variable message signs that we can place to warn the public that they'll be using the roads. Route 15, there are 2 bullets there, Cadmus and Coniston. We are looking at a pavement marking solution that will provide left-hand turn lanes on Route 15 at those intersections. So we're still working to find a final solution, and we'll present that to the town council in Gordonsville soon. Hopefully this spring. We had one solution, got some feedback from them, and we're going to update that and meet with them again. The Route 522, 636 intersection, Bethel Kefyalu, our assistant resident engineer, has got a plan for some site distance improvements there. And we have funding for that we want to get started on as soon as the weather and the ground dries up a little bit. We're going to make some safety improvements to that intersection. It's the northern intersection above 611 to try to reduce some of the crash patterns that we've seen there. Orange County, the Gateway Sign Project, we continue working with your consultant in the county to evaluate their plans. They've recently completed their survey, and we're looking for final plans from the county for the Gateway Sign Project. We're also working on a wayfinding sign program with the town of Gordonsville, and they've given us a final set of plans, and they hope to begin this year. On the completed studies, down at the bottom of the list on page 3, I did want to note the Route 617 study in Everona. The traffic engineer does not recommend further reducing the posted speed limit at this time. And I will be glad to go over that. Supervisor Marshall, if you have any questions about that, please follow up with me and let me know. I'll share that study with you to review. From page 4 of your monthly report, I did want to note the digital radar feedback signs that we have. We still have those. They're charged up and ready to go, and we're looking for different locations across the communities that we serve to hang those radar feedback signs. For a low-cost countermeasure, we leave them out for 3 to 4 weeks and find that they have been really effective in generating awareness, especially where we have a speed limit that changes. So if you have a location where we can put those in, please let me know. And from page 5, I always want to put a plug in for our area headquarters. The crews in Gordonsville and Rhodesville, they've responded to 733 work orders so far this year. And that is in addition to all of their response to emergency weather out in the middle of the night during traffic detours for vehicle crashes and so on. So we're very thankful for them. They do a great job. And gentlemen, that is all that I had from my monthly report tonight. I'd be glad to answer any questions that I can.
Thank you, Alan. Alan, I have one question. What did it take to get ways to change that routing into Lake of the Woods?
We have a point of contact. VDOT in our traffic operations center in Stanton has a point of contact at the GPS providers, and they develop downloads for truck dispatching software products and Waze and Google. And we put together requests for them and submit them through our TOC in Stanton directly to the vendor, and they'll update their GPS database to show those needs. And I was thankful that it's still there, and it seems like it's working. And I say it's still there because we gave over in Rapidan, there is a railroad overpass that's very low, and we've seen systemic truck strikes there. And the Waze folks updated their tool in Google Maps with the overhead hazards. And the last time I checked, that wasn't there. So we're circling back around with them to make sure that it's there. But in this instance, there were several of the Waze crew that evaluated the routes. They looked at the traffic. They coordinated with our TAC and Sandy Wyrick and Matt Shiley over at our traffic operations center. They just did a great job coordinating with them, trying to find a solution. So if there's another area that you know of, and if this is working or if it's not, please let me know. Did I answer your question?
I did.
Maybe we should have tried that with S-Power in Spotsylvania County, gone through ways, taking care of more problems than we thought. Anybody else have anything?
I had a question for Alan. On page 2 of your report, you're showing the Orange County resurfacing for 2021, and the miles, both in the plant mix and the surface treatment, are down considerably from where they've been historically. Is that a budget indicator, or is that you've caught up and we don't need it, or what? You have any sort of put that in context a little bit for us, if you would?
Well, it is on the one hand, and it's a good question. And on the one hand, it seems like it's a good problem because our resurfacing allocations are distributed to our counties based on surface condition. It's a combination of surface condition and ADT. So when the Louisa residency assumed support of Orange County, we mixed up our resurfacing tactics a little bit and included a lot more surface treatment. And we shifted the dollars from plant mix to surface treatment to gain more miles. And you can note that I should go back probably pre-2016 and show those dollars in there so that you can see the delta in the number of lane miles of surface treatment that we've begun to apply. So the allocation is based on surface condition and ADT for secondary routes. And as our secondary route surface condition improves, our resurfacing funds are allocated to other areas and other areas across the state. So on the one hand, the solutions that we've been deploying, the good news is they're working to improve our surface conditions. But at the same time, as our surface conditions improve, the funds will decline as they shift to other areas in the state. So you can see and Orange County is not alone. Across the communities that we serve, we've seen a significant reduction in funding for secondary resurfacing. There are other areas across the state where their secondary roads are in much worse condition, and the funding is shifting to those locations to help improve.
The overall budget for resurfacing statewide fairly constant, or has that been dramatically changed?
It hasn't. It's a good question, and I'm not sure exactly what the dollar amount is statewide. And overall, we've seen some of those allocations shift. It seems like some of the areas, the funding that has become available for the resurfacing has increased, but on the whole, it has decreased. I'm not sure the exact amount. That's a good question, and I should know that and have that in front of me. I should probably put it on a poster and hang it in my office. But at least for ours, within the communities that we serve, that it has been reduced significantly. But I'll follow up and let you know at a statewide level and within the Culpeper district what our resurfacing numbers look like over the past several years, so that you can gauge the impact. But we did see a significant reduction this year, and you're not alone.
Just one other comment, if I might. I just want to thank you and your staff. As you know, we are very actively still obtaining permits to lay fiber in your right-of-ways, and you and your organization have been very responsive to the county in that endeavor. And once again, I want to make sure that that we show our appreciation and thank you for helping us in a project that we're very aggressively pursuing there. You guys have not been the bottleneck, which is a big help. Thanks.
Yes, sir. I'll share that with them. Our land use team, especially Bruce Henning, he covers 3 counties.
Right.
And he's been doing a good job hopping around, and I will share that with him. Thank you very much. Mark Wood and his team do a great job.
All right, thank you very much, Alan.
Oh, yes, sir, gentlemen. Thank you too. Have a good evening.
You too, thank you.
Thank
All right, we will now move to the consent agenda. And a motion.
We just
We
passed
did,
it. We already passed it.
yeah, we passed.
We did pass it, okay, my apologies. Y'all got me messed up by our first meeting today. All right, new business. Glenda, you want to come up, the budget amendments?
Right, this is the item that was moved from the consent agenda. And we had some library donations, but in addition, there was a grant for Montpelier that I received some questions on, so I just wanted to be able to clarify what the grant is all about. A couple of months ago, the county administrator and I were
I'm
Oh,
informed.
sorry, Glenda. What we really need to do is separate these. So the Montpelier grant needs to be separated from all of the other budget amendments. Now, I would move, if the chairman doesn't object, I would move that we approve the other budget amendments not connected with the Montpelier grant.
Motion's been made, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Thanks, Mr. Allen.
So, we were notified by Montpelier that the General Assembly had approved an appropriation for them. It's $1 million grant. It's gonna require them to match it by a like $1 million. It's being administered through the Department of Historic Resources, and it's for a project they're doing called the Montpelier Memorialization of Descendant Enslaved Community. Looking at the paperwork, it involves a memorial at the enslaved community cemetery out there and some education programming as well. And because the rule at the state apparently is due to an attorney general opinion from 2011, is that the state can't transfer the money directly to a nonprofit. So therefore, they want the county to be the in-between fiscal agent. But the MOU draft that they provided, and I've also talked with the folks at the Historic Resources Department, they really are taking on the responsibility for making sure that they follow all the state and federal laws. They will review their applications for reimbursement and then notify the county to release the funds when they're satisfied that all the requirements have been met. But they did say that they plan to transfer the funds to the county before June 30th, which is why I went ahead and put it on the agenda. It is right under the threshold that would require a public hearing. If we do a budget amendment, as you know, that's more than 1% of our total budget, it triggers a public hearing. So this year our budget is about 125 million. So this would be right under that. That's about what I know about this. It's, at this point, the Montpelier Foundation is working to finalize an application with DHR, and at that point they will finalize the MOU, which would need to come back to the board since we'll be a player in how the money flows. But I did send along a draft of that MOU, but I don't have a final at this time.
Essentially, it is a safeguard of the monies coming from the state going to a nonprofit. And we are just the agent to transfer that money, much like the Regional Commission does on tons of stuff every year. Is that your understanding?
Yes, because normally there are a lot of strings attached to any kind of grant money, so, I was concerned too about what responsibilities that we might have to, review and audit the information. But DHR is taking on all of that, and our only responsibility is for the treasurer to hold the money and just release it when DHR instructs us to do so.
Per the MOU, if it's approved.
Well, you and I spoke earlier about the draft MOU, which has a lot of holes in it, and obviously in its final form would have to come back to us. I mean, there are a couple of, I'm concerned that we clarify our role. There's a bullet in there under local government will. It says serve as fiscal agent for the entity for the project. I have no idea what that means. And the second bullet talks about release the funds when we're notified by DHR to release it. Seems to me like at a maximum, that second bullet is the only thing we would be in a position to participate in, because.
Well, I can certainly make that suggestion to them that they take out the wording of fiscal agent. I did, like I said, I talked to them, and he reassured me that there weren't the responsibilities that normally come along with being a fiscal agent. It was just more holding the funds. But at this point, we still have, we have the opportunity to have input in how the MOU was drafted. Also, Mr. White, you had asked me the question about the easement, and they said that would be waived in this case because they're not doing any improvements to any buildings. That only comes into play when there are buildings involved and the state puts money into it and they want to ensure that the use is not changed later after they've invested in it.
Because that potentially could trigger another involvement of the county to approve a virtual easement. Some of those come to us. Now, we don't have a lot of authority to reject them, but we do see it. So, but that's going away, okay. Well, my biggest concern was that this was obviously a draft, had lots of holes in it, and rather than try to approve something tonight, we needed to set in motion the actions that say, if and when you're ever ready, then we'll take a look at it.
Any further discussion?
Although it's under the 1% threshold for public discussion, I think it's of size enough that maybe we should have public discussion on it.
Well, we can,
And I would like to hear from Montpelier, just looking at their budget, $2 million. The majority of that money is in payroll and consultant fees. I question how maybe efficiently that money is being used. And I would like maybe to hear from them.
I'm sure they would be glad to come and.
I'd love for them to.
Here.
Well, and I think they need to go a little bit further in describing their plan to find the matching funds. What they have shown so far, there's a huge gap between the commitments they have and where they need to be in order to comply with the grant. Assuming it looks like it's a 50-50 match, if I understand it correctly.
Right, that's right.
One other thing that I question is that there was a small percentage of that money was going to be used for educating our youth and retraining our law enforcement. And I just question whether that's a proper venue for that and whether their personnel is the proper people to be doing it.
In the past, when we've had grants that the county acted as a sort of a pass-through on, in most cases, they were for sort of single shot things. There was an APHID grant that was applied for just, 4 or 5 years ago. I think it was for like $20,000. And we had all kinds of upfront information and explanations about what that was and how it was going to be used. And the county sort of participated in the in how that was crafted. And then the county participated in actually carrying the grant out. And this was for $1 million. And the county wasn't told anything. It was just, we got a memo one day that, oh, you're gonna be the fiscal agent on this. I just don't, to me, it doesn't, I think it's a strange process. State is gonna fund something, but they're gonna run it through Orange County's books. And that to me just doesn't make any sense. And, you know.
We have no responsibility for any of it.
And who knows? I mean, but it's a lot of money. If it were $20,000 or $25,000, you know, I'd probably shake my head and go on. But this is $1 million, and we weren't consulted up front. We weren't given a chance to opt in or opt out, or Montpelier didn't come to us and ask our opinion on it. Just seems like an odd kind of an arrangement where any private entity, you know, Montpelier is a private entity, can go to the state and get money and then kind of inform us secondhand that, oh, by the way, you're going to have to be involved in this. It just seems like a very, and you know, I guess Ken Cuccinelli was the Attorney General and issued this opinion. I question how much a 10 or 15-year-old Attorney General opinion, how much actual strength that has on, you know, in prohibiting the Virginia legislature from doing something of this sort. I don't think it prohibits the legislature from doing it at all.
No, I mean, if you go to the Attorney General's site, it says right on there, these are opinions, they're not binding law.
And they're certainly not binding on the legislature, which writes the law.
Another, I mean, maybe it's a minor point, but it caught my attention in the letter from DHR notifying of the action by the General Assembly. It says, among other things, I'm formally notifying the Montpelier Foundation, Montpelier Descendants Committee, James Madison University, and the Board of Supervisors of Orange County, parentheses, the partners. That was the first thing that I read, and I went, really? We're not just a bank, we're now a partner. There's just a lot of cleanup and additional information that needs to take place, it seems to me.
Should we get a briefing on what they're planning to do, as well as making sure that the MOU keeps us from getting tapped for any responsibility?
Well, I was going to suggest that maybe Glenda reach out to Montpelier and get them to schedule sooner than later to come before the board, either work session, probably work session beforehand, to answer all the questions and let us know the actual process as they understand it, as well as anything else they get from the state.
Okay.
And I do want to mention that that they did reach out to us a number of weeks ago, but it wasn't to solicit us being a partner and applying and all. It was more, hey, by the way, we need to let you know we got this approved and it looks like you're going to have to be the pass-through. We were sort of, you know, a bit taken aback, but we said, what does that mean? And their simple explanation was, well, we're not entirely sure, but we think you just have to be the fiscal agent, which the most recent memory for us was the ICE-T grant for the train station, which I've certainly been involved with those, where it's a federal project and it passes through the state and what have you. It looks like the involvement they want from us for this is even smaller, but nonetheless, I just simply wanted to mention that they did reach out to us, but it wasn't like the state saying to be a partner. It was just, can you be our fiscal agent? We said, well, I guess.
Well, but the additional problem here is where will this end? I mean, if, you know, I kind of have the feeling this happens once, it's probably going to happen again.
Certainly through this agency, it
Well,
sounds like it.
and so it seems like that we need to, register some kind of a, certainly if a majority agree, we need to register some kind of an objection with our representatives saying, hey,
Fix this.
you guys do whatever you want to in Richmond, but don't drag us into it without our consent,
Concurrence.
without us having any foreknowledge. I mean, the IST grant, for instance, I was around when that was done, and there was all kinds of discussion, and I think I thought the county applied for it.
I think you're right.
Town. I'm not certain, but that was a completely different.
Yes.
In terms of the approach, it may have been similar in terms of the county acting as a conduit of the money, but.
Yeah.
At least don't declare us a partner without asking.
Yeah.
Okay.
Got that?
We'll work on getting them in for a presentation.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, old business. Do we have Sandra?
Yes, sir. She's joining by Zoom. I just saw her.
There she is.
Here.
Okay. Item 6A under old business is ZTA 20-02. I'll let you speak, Sandra.
Yes, this was a continuation or your carried over hearing from February 9th to consider an amendment to section 70-646, item 5 of the zoning ordinance. The purpose of the amendment is to reduce the required setback from the right-of-way of Constitution Highway, State Route 20, between Hardwick Mountain Drive and Maud's Lane in the vicinity of Barbersville from 300 feet to 150 feet. When your hearing was left open for your receipt of public comment, I don't have anything new to add to the presentation I made on the 9th. I'm glad to review any of that if you'd like.
Is there any desire for any of that to be reviewed? All right. Allison, we've received nothing else, correct?
We received no public comment, no, sir.
Okay. Public hearing is closed. And at this time, I would entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. And that would be a roll call vote.
Mr. Marshall? Mr. Crozier?
Aye.
Mr. Frame?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
And Mr. White?
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you very much, Sandra.
Thank you, and folks that live on Route 20, thank you.
Yes. Very good. All right, moving right along. Ms. Bradley, supplemental appropriation and budget amendment.
This item, the public hearing was opened at last meeting, and this is for a transfer from the general fund to our COVID relief fund of the savings that we achieved by using the presumptive salaries for COVID CARES Act reporting. So it's a total of 2.3 million, and what it will do is allow us to complete the projects that the board had previously approved under the spending plans without the restrictions of the time limits of the CARES Act.
We've received no comments whatsoever, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Close the public hearing.
Motion to approve.
Second. All right, and this one also needs to be,
Yes, sir. Mr. White?
Aye.
Mr. Crozier?
aye?
Mr. Frame?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
And Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you very much, Glenda. Next is Department Director and Constitutional Officer reports. I see none. Mr. Waxman.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Voorhees.
No report.
Okay. Next, we'll move on to board comment, and we'll start down with Mr. Frame.
Yeah. I have been trying to attend some meetings that I wouldn't normally go to, but when I can attend it by Zoom, it's a lot easier. And when I've attended, they've sent me the agendas, and I've seen copies of minutes. First time I've ever seen some of these minutes. Such things as the Skyline Community Action, Community Services Board. And so I decided to look at the website and see what we have in minutes. And there are a lot of different groups and committees we're involved with. There's something like 28 of them. And some of them have recent minutes. Some of them go back to 2013. What my suggestion is that maybe we look at, see, you know, like we get 3 sets of minutes in our board packages, you know, RSA, the Culpeper Soil and Water, and the, yeah, and that's it. And it seems to me that we're involved with a lot of these other things, and we ought to have some access. I'm not sure we need to enlarge our board packages by any significant amount. But I think we ought to take a look at all of those and see whether or not we are getting minutes, whether they're getting filed, and the accessibility to it. Some of these minutes I couldn't even find until I said, oh, archives. So we go to the archives, we aren't led to it by anything. And I think we need to look and see how those minutes are coming in. Part of our open governing to the public, that we need to do a little bit better job of putting that all together. And I don't have a solution to this, but it seems to me that we ought to be able to look and say, okay, if I want to look at the library board, I can see what their minutes are. I can see whether they're doing them regularly, any of the other committees that we have. And which of those committees, which we're involved, like Community Services Board or Skyline Camp or the Central Virginia Regional Jail, whether we should see those minutes and whether they should be available on our website. That's my comment.
Do we get those routinely? I mean, are they supposed to be forwarding to you?
So the ones that are included in the board packet, we receive routinely. And when you all receive them as informational items in your board packet, Michelle uploads them to the Archive Center. The Archive Center is just a term that our website uses, and it's basically a compilation in chronological order of all of the minutes that we've received. We send out annual reminders to staff to encourage them that as they're, the groups like Airport Commission that are staffed by a team member here in Orange, we encourage them to upload their minutes to the Archive Center. Some of the outside organizations, we don't routinely get that correspondence from, which is why there's either not a link to the Archive Center on their page to access those minutes, or there's a link on our website that refers you to that organization's website, and then we're at their mercy as to what information they upload. That would be like the Community Services Board, the Regional Commission, the Regional Jail, and that sort of thing. Some of those organizations don't disclose the minutes, either because they have juveniles in them, such as the case of the, detention center. But that's kind of where we're getting the information now.
Most of those meetings that have closed information, have closed sessions, and they don't show up in their minutes. I'm thinking when I go to the section of the board of the website says agendas and minutes, it's the board, the planning commission, and the board of zoning appeals.
Yes, sir.
And that's it. And so, and I'm not sure we need to change that, but I think that if we want to be open to the public, we ought to have that information. And I think things like the Community Services Board, where we're actually providing funding, that we ought to know what's going on.
Well, we can require it if we're providing funding directly to them. And I believe that both the jail, the planning commission, they provide their minutes.
The jail?
Yes, we may not include them.
I couldn't even find the regional jail minutes on there.
I'll talk to Frank and get that taken care of.
And Michelle can certainly, reach out to me. She already has routine, communication with these organizations as she's putting together your 3-month calendar that goes into the board packet. So she has a point of contact at each of these places, and I don't think she would mind taking on, the lead and getting some of those minutes and, building an archive for us to have on the website. It's easy for us to do that as long as we're getting the information routinely, we can keep it up to date.
But I would think that if I want to look at I should be able to go to the, either the boards and committees that are associated, and if I've got a library board, I ought to be able to get to their minutes, or if I go to the department, the library department, I'll be able to get to those minutes. I shouldn't have to understand that there's an archives and it doesn't show up anywhere.
So if you go to the library page, you would like to see a link to the library board page under library to get to that
kind of
information.
thing. So that, or if I go to the list of boards and commissions and I see the library board that said, here's the members, here's their minutes. So I ought to be able to get to that from multiple sources so that it's an easy way for people to find out what's going on.
Mhm.
It's a part of one of our goals is to be an open and electronically compatible county.
Sure, we can work on that.
All right.
Mr. Johnson.
I would welcome Mr. Marshall. And I would also just want to say that I know that the process for the corona vaccines is a sort of a unknown. You can see bits and pieces of it here and there. We don't know how it's being done overall. But here locally, I want to thank Orange Family Physicians for jumping into the breach and making themselves available to help out with this. I know that Orange County Fire and EMS is also involved in that. So, we've got a situation where I don't think anybody knows 100% what's going on, but there are people in the community who are working to make it work as well as we can, given the restraints that we're under. So thank you to those people who are doing the best they can to help the community get these vaccines for anyone who wants them.
Good, okay. I also would like to welcome Mr. Marshall to the board. You did very well. You were here before the rest of us tonight, because we were all in a caravan driving down the road, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. White.
Also like to welcome Supervisor Marshall. It's had an interesting thing happen this morning. I had an early morning meeting in Culpeper. For the first time in recent memory, I encountered school buses. It got me to thinking. And I was in a meeting yesterday where the topic came up. I guess I'd like to add my 2 cents to an ongoing conversation that encourages all those involved in the decision-making ladder, I'll call it, about the schools. That we make every effort that we possibly can to get our kids back into school. I've had some conversations with families and in a couple cases, my own grandsons who are outside the county about this matter, and it's clear that the impact that is happening to our children in terms of not just the educational part of it, but all the other pieces that we've all heard about is something that's very real. And I think whether it's encouragement or whatever, that's something that needs to continue to be a topic of conversation to the point where we're back in school and the kids are getting the things that they need. I heard a conversation, I guess it was on the radio a couple of days ago, that some of the experts in this matter are now saying that particularly children in 8th grade and younger have really lost an entire year of development, not just education, of development. And it is unlikely to be recouped. I don't know whether it's true or not, sounding serious. Clearly the impact is one that's real. It's not really within our purview other than to make a plea to those that have responsibilities in this area to do their darndest to get the show back on the road.
Mr. Marshall.
Well, I want to first take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for the opportunity, and however short it may be, I think it's going to be a great learning experience, and truly look forward to working with each and every one of you. And it was kind of made easy for me to want to maybe take this position, knowing that we had such a strong board, and I really feel that, as many in the community has, that y'all do a good job, and just to fill in wasn't a hard decision whatsoever. I want to appreciate it. Thank you again.
Thanks.
You will find it's a fire hose.
That's right.
Look out.
Some days, it's just harder than others.
There are.
All right, very good.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to
Yes.
piggyback on Mr. Frame's comments, because while we're sitting here, to find the library board, you have to go to county government. Then you click on, then you click on boards and commissions. Then you click on appointed by the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah.
And then when you go down from there, you get to the library board, which you can click on. And then they have a link for most recent and view all. And it looks like the most recent was October of 2019, so. But yeah, that's, some of this, our website, unfortunately, this is not the only place where our website, you have to go through multiple clicks to find what you're looking for. I would hope there's a little quicker way that we could set it up, but anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
Yes, very. I believe that Mr. Voorhees has been working on a number of these items. And I will say, if everybody remembers the website from a year or two ago, at least we can find these things now. And I would hope that they do continue to improve, and we can incorporate those things. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
There's nothing else from board comment. We have the informational items, and then appointments to boards, commissions, and committees. Does anyone have anything? I know that we have some appointments for Mr. Marshall.
Boy, do we ever.
Yes, we do. Is there, as I'm getting to that portion of my agenda, Allison, did you have a list done?
Yes, sir, contained in the board packet is you all's current, what we affectionately refer to as committee assignments. And you'll see the District 3 vacancy is listed there, other than moving the joint board and school board CIP subcommittee from District 3 to Mr. Johnson during your organizational meeting. The other District 3 assignments remain in place.
Okay.
We need to add to the broadband authority board as well.
Were you able to find that attachment?
Just
Yes, he's looking at it.
Okay.
And One question with that. What was there a decision made on the airport commission previously because was Mr.
During the organizational meeting, Mr. Frame offered to fill in as necessary. But we didn't make a permanent change, and because he's already liaison on EDA, we didn't make a change there either.
I just wanted to make sure. All right, let's go ahead and do this one first and then see if there's any other appointments. I would, Mr. White, you had said the broadband authority as well, correct?
So, somebody asked the question.
I mentioned that we need to add it to the broadband authority as well as any of these that we are current vacant seats.
Tom, how does that currently read? Is it the Board of Supervisors is the broadband authority, is that?
No, the Board of Supervisors, the initial document made the board made them the broadband authority, but subsequently you appoint broadband authority members, so you would need to appoint Mr. Marshall.
I would move to do so.
Okay, and that would include everything under the District 3.
Yeah, is your motion all of these plus the broadband?
Yeah, we'll
Is that
look at all.
what you're saying? Okay.
You second that, Mr. Johnson? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Very good, passes unanimously. Now, are there any other boards or commissions appointments that we need to? Anyone has to make? All right. Next will be the calendar. Anything we need to schedule on the calendar, Allison?
No, sir, you all are up to date with your March 9th public hearing coming up. You're up to date on planning commission action at this point with several land use decisions that'll be coming soon.
As I have mentioned before, I believe the planning commission may need to reenact their second monthly meeting. I think that may end up being a little too much for them to handle in one meeting. All right, and with that being said, I would entertain one more motion.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned.
Now we get a picture take.
Allison, just to double check, we're all done closing the meeting?
Yes, I think we were muted.